Yeah, good.
Okay. Good evening, dear urban thinkers. A warm welcome to our first virtual Urban Thinkers Campus, special edition COVID-19 pandemic, public space and public life. My name is Dr. Simone Borrell, and I will guide you through this wonderful evening. COVID-19 and the measures against spreading, such as social distancing, lockdown, you all remember, have had a massive impact on our public life and public space worldwide. Traffic routes that were once crowded were empty. Open spaces could not be used at all or only under certain conditions. And formerly busy shopping streets, such as the Planken in Mannheim, they seem to be snatched away from their original purpose. But we also had good effects. Mother Earth came back. Noisy, crowded places were refilled with singing birds. I'm sorry, we didn't have dolphins in Mannheim, such as in Venice. Public space was recaptured by people and not by cars. And worldwide, the air got better, and people came out for walking, cycling in streets and parks as dominant form of mobility. So you see, times, they are changing, as Bob Dylan has already sung. Tonight at Urban Thinkers Campus, we want to discuss these effects of COVID-19 on public space with you and four stunning experts. This digital Urban Thinkers Campus serves as a prelude to the full-day Urban Thinkers Campus on COVID-19 on public space in autumn 2020. So let's see that as a little appetizer for your thoughts. Before I pass the word now to our Lord Mayor, Dr. Peter Kurz, who is already with us, and he will welcome you, I want to give you some short technical notes, because we do this all together now in digital. First, this session is being recorded, and this means you will receive the recording and the documentation of this UTC in a few weeks. Second, conference language is English, as you have already noticed. But there is a separate room, room 2, with a German translation. So thanks to Sandra Müller. And third, we want your opinion. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions or to put some comments into the chat while our experts are speaking. I will sum them up for you and ask them to our experts in the last discussion. And please don't worry, you are all taking part. Although you cannot see your video, you just see our experts. But we have turned off your camera and also your microphone for getting a better conference quality. And now, I wish you a great evening, great inspiring discussion, and I will pass the word to our Lord Mayor, Dr. Peter Kurz. Dr. Kurz, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Borrell. Welcome to you all, and welcome to our fourth Urban Thinkers Campus. You see, UTCs have a tradition in Mannheim, and we see them as part of our contribution to a more sustainable and fairer world. UTC is a brand and a concept of UN Habitat, and it's also for us an example and an instrument for an active role of a city in a worldwide multilateral governance system. Our first UTC took place in 2016. We were the only German city back then preparing the Habitat 3 Urban Agenda Conference in Quito. And we provided in that time a Mannheim Manifesto. It was titled Urban Citizenship in a Nomadic World. And this is still, I think, a great title for an actual debate. Then we had a second UTC in Urban Thinkers Campus 2017. This was a big milestone in the mission statement process, Mannheim 2030, with a broad-based participation, citizen participation, based on the 17 SDGs. And ultimately, last year, 2019, we finished our local agenda, Leitbild Mannheim 2030. This Leitbild was adopted by the City Council this last year, and our third UTC 2019 was designed to I realized that I muted myself, so I hope that I was heard. until now. Our third UTC 2019 was designed to create partnerships for implementation of the Mannheim 2030 visions. All results and experience of the UTCs were implemented in global processes. So we addressed, as I mentioned, Habitat 3 and also the World Urban Forum 9 and also the World Urban Forum 10 in this year in Abu Dhabi right before the lockdown. What we experienced in the last few weeks is that COVID has changed a lot, and it's also a magnifying glass as well as a booster for developments. The crisis changed also the perception of the role of cities, and we all saw and experienced that good governance on the local level, leadership by mayors, and a real multi-level governance proved to be decisive for successful management. Cities were critical actors in flattening the curve of infections and responding in the short and long term. To give you some examples from our city, after primary schools closed and the children had to assist to classes online, we distributed tablets to children who would otherwise have no means of participating in online classes. Or we provided multilingual information about all measures, especially for citizens in diversity quarters. We published at a very early stage a public campaign with recommendations for proper hygiene and sanitation. All information materials have been translated into the major languages spoken in Mannheim, such as Turkish, Bulgarian, or Romanian. In addition, medical doctors with migration background at Mannheim's University Hospital launched a video campaign in different languages. When regulations became complex, we started a poster and social media campaign with many partners called Mannheim's Remains Cautious to keep things going well, with 5 simple rules, and all materials have been translated again. Our own housing company with 19,000 apartments deferred the rents for tenants who suffered income losses due to COVID-19. And furthermore, we converted a 78-room building formerly used by the US military forces to accommodate homeless people. We had to make offers for the need of staying at home. For example, concerts taking place each April evening on the balcony of the district management in Jungbusch, encouraging and connecting people. Now we installed a mobile stage for musicians touring the suburbs. And the last example, today we are offering in a diversity district with a lot of citizens from Southeast Europe free testings. Access to and trust from the community is a predictor for this important initiative. Pop-up bike lanes are going to be implemented along the ring, which is a 4 to 6 lane street, making the border of Mannheim's inner city. The conversion of former car parking spaces into open spaces for outdoor catering was realized within weeks and seemed to be no longer a major conflict, which it was before during the last months. We see we are able to change our habits and infrastructure very quickly if we want. Look how fast we adopted video conferences in our daily life. What we want to start now is to reflect the long-term impacts. It's pretty obvious regarding mobility, especially foster biking within the urban core. There are also discussions going on in many cities about food supply and the idea of urban farming. We are going to review our vision, our Mannheim Lightbuild, and especially our measures to implement our vision Mannheim 2030 in view of COVID-19. The first step is this UTC. We want to focus on public space. Its use by people changed, and public space was much more appreciated than before. Can we make use of this trend, and how should we respond to it? In this UTC, we start to discuss how public life and the use of public space changed during COVID. We will see evidence-based examples from Denmark, presented by Erasmus Duong-Grunnet and Jens Loff. We will have a look on integrated participation processes on designing public spaces via design thinking with Professor Pahl-Weber, and we will have a quick look in the change of using the public space in Mannheim neighborhoods with Dr. Pahl. The following discussion, which is moderated by Dr. Borrell, will be the basic for the upcoming big UTC in autumn this year. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussion, to this new reviewing process of our light build and especially our measures. I wish us all an insightful and exciting discussion. Once again, welcome to you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurz. Ooh, our sound was changing too quick. So again, thank you so much to Dr. Kurz for welcoming us. And as you've said, Covet changed a lot, and we are able to having these beautiful digital conferences tonight. So let's start, because we have already two speakers waiting for us. I may introduce to our two first speakers, Erasmus Duong-Grunnet and Jens Loff. Erasmus Duong-Grunnet, Director of GEL Architects. As director, he works on developing and overseeing projects in China and Germany. He has also lived and worked more than 12 years in Shanghai, so he knows the special cultural and social context in Chinese cities. He has also lived and worked in Bremen for many years, holding various degrees, for example, a Bachelor in Cultural Encounters, a Master's degree in Strategic Urban Planning, a Master's degree in International Politics and Public Affairs from different international universities. Together with him, we have Jens Loff, partner of Nordlicht. Jens Loff is the Danish managing director, and he knows how to inspire people for visionary ideas. He works on strategy and management consulting for areas from the public sector and the non-profit sector. For the 5th time in a row, and this is really, really amazing, from 2016 to 2020, Nordlicht was recognized as one of the best consultancies in Germany, for example, in the category Change Management and Transformation and Public Sector. One fun fact at the end, on his homepage, Jens Loff writes, when you call him, you can listen to the AC/DC song Highway to Hell. So we are looking forward to your talk to public space and public life during COVID-19.
Thank you, Simone. That's quite a rock and roll introduction. I like that. So let's go into the topic now. We are in a very good time constraint. I think the floor has been kind of drawn up very well by Peter Kurz, Lord Mayor. And we would like to go into actually two dimensions of observations we are having in the COVID-19 period and in the opening strategies. As we all know, all cities and everybody present in this forum now have their own strategies and have had good strategies, maybe bad strategies, but everybody is working on plans and trying to push things forward. So COVID-19 has changed the floor and the playing ground for strategies, especially in the public space area. And we're looking at the data, and Erasmus will tell you in a moment about the observations collected in recent months by GEL. And we're also looking at the way cities and citizens are engaging in decision processes, in co-design processes around creating new solutions. And we would like to go into that a bit and have, this as an impulse, and are very happy to get into discussions and questions for you in a moment. So let me take you down on the floor of this. Simone just very fine and very competently presented our two companies. We'll not go into that now. I'd like to hand over the first part of our presentation about observations to Erasmus, and I'll then go back to the decision process with you guys in a moment. Erasmus.
Thank you, and thanks for having us here. It's a pleasure to be part of this forum. It's nice to be, albeit virtually, but at least to be in Mannheim again, a place that we really enjoyed working. So when this situation happened with the COVID-19 at GEL, we were in a position via funding from a foundation in Denmark called Realdania and support from, among other cities, City of Copenhagen. We were able to go out and actually do what we call a public space, public life survey, where we investigated and measured public life in 4 cities in Denmark, among them Copenhagen. One of the things we were able to do was to do this in places where we had a lot of data from beforehand, where we knew about the situation before COVID-19, where we collected data so we could measure and see how the situation was affecting and impacting the use of public space and the types of public life evolving in cities. We also chose cities and locations in those cities that were comparable to other places. So for example, we can hold them up against like a place like Mannheim, other cities around Europe, to understand how can we draw some conclusions from this. So I have to see if I can take over the presenter control, or just Jens, if you can go to the next slide for me. Yeah, that also works. So the full report, as you saw, is available on our website or the covid19.glpeople.com. Feel free to read it. It's in English as well. There were 10 snapshots sort of evolved in the report. 3 I wanted to highlight here. It was mentioned a little bit in the opening also by Lord Mayor Dr. Kurz. So we've seen a significant drop in downtown activities. So places where people would come as a destination for retail purposes had a severe drop in activities. And this was something we found in Copenhagen and in 3 other cities that we looked at. In other comparable data we've got from other cities, we see this to be a similar story. So that was one snapshot that I think is also the case for Mannheim. What we've also seen is the one called snapshot 4 here. Local places that already offer public activity has become even more public than before. So we see an interest from people in seeking out their local community public spaces and finding ways to use them. And this is not just public spaces that is a square or a simple space. Public and well-designed public spaces that invite people to come and use them, invite for different types of uses, have really become a magnet in the local community and been used much more than before. And then I wanted to highlight number 7 here that we can get into a bit further also. New activities and forms of urban life. So people have experimented, sought out other ways to use the public space that a city offers to find new ways of creating meaningful public life. These were 3 of the snapshots that I want to highlight here. Can you go to the next one, Jens? So just as an example, here's one of the areas that we surveyed in Copenhagen. So the way that we do surveys is we go out, we use a simple app, but we send surveyors out. And in the surveys we did in Denmark, we had around 60 surveyors out in 40 cities. And we survey and we take mostly 2 locations in 2 different days. And we count pedestrians, we count people on bicycles, and we count activities, and we make observations. What type of activities? Are people using the place together? How long time are they staying? And what are the type of relationship they have with certain spaces? So we say, for example, here that in good meeting places that are well designed and invite users, we've seen in some of them an increase in 35%. We see that car traffic is down, but the number of people increase and they stay longer. So if you read the report in full, you can see a bit on the methodology also. But here's one that has a playground. It's in Amager in Copenhagen, a playground, and some local squares you can hang out in a skate park. And we've seen increases go up during the corona. Can you go to the next one, Jens? What we could also see was that places that have public invitations and good programming. So some examples in Copenhagen could be a place called Inghaveplads, Superkinen, Sundby Østerplads. The activity has gone up during COVID-19 afterwards, increased from before. People have sought out these locations and they use them extensively to really try to get some sort of shared community feeling in the local community, more than we've even seen before. Can you go forward, Jens? One of the things that we look a lot at now is the this momentum that we have seen. Cities have been hardly hit by the COVID-19 situation, but there's also a momentum in the urban life and local neighborhoods and the way that it's been used, and we've seen that it's become really essential. And that has been, as Lord Mayor Dr. Kurz said, there was a magnifying glass, to really see that this has been, COVID-19 has been used as a magnifying glass to show us that this is more important than ever before. We've also seen examples from around the world, also in Denmark, with, of course, bicycle. Milan has made big commitments, and in Berlin, in Germany especially, we hear a lot about an extensive amount of pop-up bicycle lanes. A lot of news about that, and we know that in Mannheim, for example, also pop-up bicycle lanes are happening. We also see other things. For example, there's this example from Holland that I took here, where they have created a concept called vacation streets. People can't move around on summer vacations as much, so they change the street and they start to look at how can the streets be seen as a public space. So how can we use it for different type of activities? Use it for vacation spaces, do different activities in the summer. And not all of it is happening in the physical space only. In Denmark, we saw a big community feeling around public singing, community singing. So the national, the Danish National Broadcasting Channel organized a sing-along at a certain time every week. And when it peaked, more than 1 million people dialed in to listen in and sing along. And what happened was that people sometimes moved out and did events in the public space to do this community singing through what was broadcasted on the national television channel. So suddenly there was a link between a shared community feeling that spilled out into the local communities. And we see a lot of this momentum. And what is really the opportunity now is to say, from what we know about public space and public life before the pandemic, what we have learned during COVID-19, how can we use that to build and move forward with long-term strategies? So I think there's one more slide, Jens. And just to make the bridge to Mannheim, of course, what we have seen is we were working in Mannheim back in August 2018, and we saw a lot of these initiatives there, and we saw some measurements we did with certain very popular public spaces, but that maybe could use even more invitations, and we could be interested in going further and seeing how COVID-19 has resulted in a situation where this is even more the case as we move forward. So I think there's a momentum where we have learned from Copenhagen, we've learned from Danish cities. We know that there's an ability now to say COVID-19 has showed us that public spaces can do so much more for public life and in local communities and local neighborhoods. And we're looking forward to see how this can become part of a city strategy moving forward from here. Jens, I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, Rasmus. So what we're seeing here, and what I think Giel is proving over the databases they have, is that we have a lot of data available. And the challenge is actually to integrate this data in a transparent way to a decision process for many cities. Obviously, all of you have steering committees and crisis committees, corona committees. But the challenge still will be to just on time find the right information, find the insights to maybe challenge existing public space strategies as we see. To go a little deeper in Mannheim, we have some impressions here from the quarters of the city, from the quarter managers, Dr. Walfall's colleagues, guessing here. And what we see here in the observations is that that on a number of more local places in Mannheim, there has been an increasing activity, and the kind of the gravity of the city has changed, as also was observed in Copenhagen and other cities. And that is in the phase 1, and we see then also in the phase 2 that the usage of spaces, of public spaces, has become an active part of a leisure moment in Mannheim, that the observations go in a direction of people using the green areas, but also the squares, more the local squares than the central squares, as a extension of their private rooms. So this will need some thinking about how can we as a city adapt services to this situation. that people for now and probably for a longer time will be engaged in a different way in the city squares. And what we also see is that the feeling, and this is the statement from Mannheim, that the big we is much more imminent in public life, that the people are in a different way supportive and helpful to each other. And there are a number of other local observations here which you can read you into. And these are things we have kind of drawn out in recent days. Of course, this is a review of the recent weeks and months, but still, I think these local statements from Mannheim make very clear that if you systematically collect observations and even data, as Erasmus and Gail is doing, on a very specific way, you get a new level of intelligence for engaging in your strategic decisions on city level, on development level, and to bind this into a process, because we all have opinions about what is happening to us these days. But I think for the city level, it's a very big challenge to create a transparent and rational process of collecting data and engaging with people who have engaged with their cities in a different way, and bring these data to the table of decision making and challenge existing mobility strategies, sustainability strategies, even the way you are planning streets and changing streets in an interactive way. And as many things which Peter Kurt said also, the moment for capturing these changes of attitude and maybe also acceptance of a different fast-track decision making, this moment is not will not be lasting forever. It's a moment where we, out of the crisis, in the crisis, and in the opening phase we are in now, we have to, as a management structure, also get our heads around and provide our data for maybe bringing different decisions to political level and to city management level and to different levels of the city. So let me move on to an idea. This is one way of creating a rational process towards collecting data, collecting a transparent setup, so we can be informed about who is taking what decision on what basis, and in the end also be in a communication with the city quarters, with the people living in streets, to make everybody, or to give at least everybody, a chance to understand what changes are coming in here. And I'll just take the steps in an overall way. This is a kind of a surrounding system, and very important, I think, is that we build this on analysis and on data. So we are obviously using good opinions of people, but it's also about seeing what is the concrete effect in the behavior, and how can you, in a generalized way, address these challenges. And that is why the analysis, not only by observations, by anthropologists, but also by statistics, by existing data. The cities have enormous amounts of data, and the challenge is now to bring this together in let us say, in a way that this can be reported into decision-making areas. So that's the first step, to get this up and going, and then starting a process where you engage with different levels of the city. So it's very much about co-creation. It's very much about also finding a way to bring the new ideas from the streets to decision makers, but also to bring decisions from which are needed in strategies down again or back again to the streets, so they can be challenged, and you can talk about this, and you can co-create in a way that the people understand why changes need to be made. And as always, we will have a lot of good changes from a smart city government, but you will also have some changes which are not so popular. And then it's very important to have an engagement and a dialogue ongoing. And if you go along these steps, you see it's a kind of a circular systems where almost every step, you need to have an engagement level where you go to city or quarter level and find citizens and discuss with them solutions and ideas and test them, and even go to a level of, if we want to implement things very fast, we need also as a city to rely on citizens engaging themselves and taking responsibility, as very much the philosophy of Mannheim it is anyway, I know, but still this needs to be put in I think in a more speedy process and in a more systematic process, so we can also live up to the speed which the crisis demands from us these days. And as long as you go along these steps, this is, as I said, a model. You can do this differently, and I'm sure many cities are working on this level. But which I really would like to stress is the importance of providing factual data and binding them together into this discussion process, and not rely only on the qualitative feeling we all have about what should be different in this crisis. So this is kind of a balance which needs to be taken, and I think a systematic process helps this. And we are trying to build this up now, and we'll set this up with the city management and the political level in Mannheim to become organized in this way. If you look at a timeline for this, it is it's hard to say how long we're going to live with that, but I would like to stress one point. I think that if you integrate an informed decision process on a monthly basis, then you will provide a quality for decision making to your city level, and you will provide a quality also for understanding and transparency to your citizens, which you also can report back to what findings you have, and in this way engage them into a more systematic process. So again, running this forward monthly level, maybe it is half a year, maybe it's a year. We will have to see how this can run, but bring together the data you have and use them for informed decision making, and keep an eye on implementation and the changes where we have the moment to do so. So that's for the input now. Simona, I'll hand back to you and take the questions as they come.
Thank you very much to Jens and Rasmus for this data presentation. I'm always very impressed by real data analysis that you've shown, and I can confirm as a Mannheim citizen, these were real pictures, and we will put the link into the chat, because this is one big advantage when you have digital conferences. So you can chat with us and see the link to a study that has been taken off, how the Covet life has changed, how public life, how public space has changed. Thank you very much. And I have already observed the chat is quite busy, and we will keep the questions for the further discussion. So please stay with us. Now we have our next speaker that I am allowed to introduce to you. It is Professor Elke Pahl-Weber from the Technical University of Berlin, from the Institute for Urban and Regional Planning. Professor Elke Pahl-Weber's research and teaching is in the field of urban planning, urban construction, spatial development, urban renewal, urban development, housing management, and megacities. So you see, we've got a real expert here in the field of community. She has reference areas in Germany, European Union, and North African, West, and Asian countries. Since 2012, she's part of the Smart City Competence Center at the Technical University Berlin and opens up Smart City Dialogue. And now in her input, she's going to talk about the project Migrant for Cities. And this is really interesting because we will learn about the method design thinking and how this project was conducted in 9 urban labs. And one of this urban lab is Mannheim. So we are looking forward to your talk, Project Migrant for Cities, Integrated Planning and Design Solution through Design Thinking in Mannheim.
Thank you so much, Dr. Borrell. So I will start. What I just learned from you is that public space is not just architecture or urban design, but it is both of that and the people who use it, who shape it, who make it to be a space. And what we as urban planners, do is forgetting what these people have to play, or that these people have to play a role in shaping these spaces. And what we now recognize during the COVID-19 pandemic period is that people behave like shapers of urban space. They come out because they can't use a lot of other usual things and make the space to be their own space. And this is a topic we address with our method of urban design thinking. Maybe all of you know that design thinking is something that has been developed with Hasso-Plattner Institute and in America for production of goods for customers. What we thought over is, can we apply this method to the urban context? And can we make people being a part of development? And what we recognize is this is a good way to develop urban space, to practice integrated urban development. I know a lot of it about how it shapes cities all over the world, because I've been representing Germany in the UN expert groups on urban and regional planning. The result is a book, and there have been a lot of seminars all over the world. What we often talked about is how should participation take place. You used the word participation as well. I don't like it. Because what we think when we use the word participation is we know what is the best, and we present it to the people and ask, are you content with it, or do you have any amendments? And then we are quite astonished that a lot of people say, no, not in my backyard. What we try to practice is coming up with a co-creation, and this is a word you used very often, in a process that is on eye level between those who are called to be urban planners, who are politicians, and who are living and using in the space for themselves. And this method was applied in a research project in Mannheim called Migrants for Cities, in a 3 years research project funded by BMBF, in a series of projects that worked with the transformation of cities. And what you see on the right hand side is the book that has just been published. And in this week we will have the online publication of the book, which is free to download and everybody can read it. Yes, what did we do? Can I have the next slide, please? Shall I do it by myself? No. Ah, thanks. What did we do in Mannheim? In fact, all the 9 urban labs took place in Mannheim. We had 5 different topics to work on. We as a research team made the proposal to work on these topics, and all who worked together with us in these urban labs said, what do we understand and what is a future perspective to develop in Mannheim? So it was 9 urban labs in Mannheim, and this is quite different from what we just heard. It took us 3 years and not 1 year or even 7 months. This was a long process and we learned a lot. We were quite astonished that all the people, the citizens, as well as public administration and entrepreneurs and scientists from the university in Mannheim, came to the labs and discussed and found out solutions. So we worked on what will working mean for the future? How will mobility change in the Mannheim quarters inner city? What does housing mean for us? And what we were quite astonished about is that the people discussed, we are not keen on saying how our flats should be designed. What we need is a place between the housings, the buildings, and they developed a module how to shape urban places where they can meet. And then we talked about engaging and common life. And how did we do that? Maybe some of you know already the process of urban design thinking. It's not the same, we just saw this hierarchy process, but it is an iterative process where we often repeat and we fail, and one of our sentences is fail early and often, so we know what works, what does not work. And it starts in the urban space with this empathizing phase. Everybody who is in the project, who is part of the urban labs, shares her view on what are we talking about? What do we need? And this is quite different from what we do in participation, where often the question comes, what do you want? And we all know the wishes can't be fulfilled. But what is the need? To know that means we can work on solutions. How could it look like? And we came up with observing the reality, working with personas, like it's done in psychoanalytics and in the economic sphere, personas that say there is a person, a human being that has the need. It's not a abstract someone, it's a real person. And then we come with general needs, and we work with prototypes. We just heard it in the other presentation before. Prototyping and testing in public space. We did it very often in Mannheim. The main testing was in August last year. It was the day when Mannheim had the heaviest rainfall for the year, so it was not that easy to test all our solutions. But we were quite successful. And what we recognize is that there is no phase of one thing implementation at the end. The implementation is part of the process, and it needs to be worked on like all the other phases are. What we develop, and what is not an original part of urban design thinking, is to work with new business models. And you just saw it on the file before that. We shape the business model with Lego and show who brings in what activity, who brings in what money, where does it go? Is there something missing? Do we have to add something? And why is this needed? Because all those who take part in this process of integrated urban development become part of the solution, of the implementation. New business models we had never known before. It cannot be the solution that the city, the administration, the municipal administration is responsible for everything that comes out. There are a lot of other people that can do something. And we always have to monitor where are we now in the realization process, and we do dissemination, discussing it with other people. This is how we go forward with our urban design thinking method. And let me just come to two topics that I think are quite helpful for the shaping of the space in this COVID-19 pandemic. On the right-hand side, we see a workbox. This is what the group that worked on it in the urban labs developed. They said what we need in future is a place in the open space that is ready to take people for working processes like they need. One day the one group, next day the other group, not even the same. It doesn't belong to someone who is always working in it, but it is a place where you can meet, and even more than that, you can place it in different places. The University of Mannheim was quite interested and said, okay, we put it in front of our campus and see how the people will use it. The Chamber of Commerce, or better said, the institution that collects the workshops in Mannheim, said, we build it. We make a wooden construction, what is another part of integrated urban development, working with creative material and be resource aware. And now there is a working box as to be an offer. The other thing is that the migrants said, we are often looked at if we go by tram, like we are not part of the society. Let us show who we are. We need a culture tram where we can offer some culture elements. And I'm very glad that the Mannheim Mobility Service said, okay, we do that. And they made a lot of tests, and we were quite astonished how good that works. How much communication it brings between the people who live in Mannheim, the migrants, and so on. It's really another way of shaping public space. And of course, you're right if you think, yes, okay, in 3 years, maybe that's good, but this is not the reality for future planning. We don't have this time. This is why we started a new project. The ministry asked us to do that, and Mannheim was ready to do it together with us. Migrants for Cities to Zero, to do all this in a period of 10 months. And to do a more comprehensive period of urban design thinking, to come out with an integrated urban development that says we are reflecting the needs of the people who shape the city, who are in the city, who shape the spaces, and we find out how to realize it. And we are quite keen to see, will we make it in 10 months or not? We will know it at the end of the next year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to Professor Elke Pahl-Weber for showing her insights with this powerful method for urban innovation. And I will also put you that link in the chat that you can have a look at the Migrant for Cities website. And please use the chat for your questions that have come up now for asking Elke later on. So thanks again. And now we have got one last speaker for tonight, Dr. Tobias Pahl-Pahl. He is the Neighborhood Management Coordinator. In Mannheim, as you all know, you've got special attention because we want sustainable development of the individual quarters in terms of urban planning, economically, ecologically, and socially. And so that's where Tobias Pahl-Pahl came in his office just in 2020. And I have heard he is a sociologist. He took over this position in 2020. And before, he was project lead at the University of Heidelberg in the field of scientific training and also the Ethnomedical Center. And he also did research on European social policy, institutional order, guiding ideas, and organizational principles. So we're really happy to have him here, and he's going to inform us about Mannheim's quarter districts during the lockdown. Happy to hear that.
Obviously, my presentation didn't make it to the screen, which brings me in a funny situation. Thank you very much for having me. One thing I learned from the previous presentation is that obviously, Professor Pahl-Weber, what you mentioned, that we need to observe reality is somewhat pretty hard thing to do. Because obviously, depending on which perspective you take, you get very different, differing impressions of what reality is. So thank you very much for having me and giving you somewhat of a little case study about what we did, what we found in the Corona, the Covet time from like March 2020. Nine. I plan to make 4 points. One is that Mannheim quarters are very heterogeneous in more than one aspect. They are very different between one another, and there's somewhat of a divide between some quarters I have to deal with in my line of work and the others. This heterogeneity leads to the necessity to look for different approaches and solutions in these quarters. Thirdly, public space has different functions for different communities. And last, therefore, the impact of the lockdown for those different communities, that was very different, and we have to look for these differences in very detail. Thank you. For now, the presentation made it, and I can click forward. Thank you. My work is centered around these 11 out of 44 quarters in Mannheim that have above average social problems in many fields. And there are just 3 dates, 3 items I took out of a lot of them to illustrate how different these quarters are from one another. We have very different percentages of youth, of migrants, of elderly people in these quarters. And therefore, the challenges we faced in this COVID times had to be regarded differentiated in those areas. Overall, we had the challenge that all citizens needed to be good informed in order to understand the measures we took and to comply to these measures. But the channels we can reach them, that had to be chosen very carefully, and not all citizens can read on the same level like the others. So we had to choose like video content, and we had to communicate a lot via multipliers and members of the communities in the areas themselves. The overall aim was to keep up the information flow in both directions. We not only needed to inform people, but also stay informed ourselves what's going on in the quarters and with the people. So what we did, like probably every city, we had some cultural events on the streets. We had musicians play. We had also the theaters. But we used these events always to get in touch with people and to just ask how are you, what problems do you face, and so on. Then we committed a lot of work to the field of communication and information flow. The overall aim was staying in contact with people, know what is on the agenda of people and what are their problems, and get information flowing in both directions, as I mentioned before. These are some impressions of public spaces in Mannheim during the lockdown. And like sports grounds, the central place in the inner city, one central place in the Neckarstadt, community gardening project and playground, and some places between settlement houses. So here we can see the different functions of public space that is different for different groups and in different areas. And this is a point I want to stress out, that we don't, to be really informed, we need to look at these areas and put it in relation to who is living there. And these areas have different functions for different people. And therefore, if the lockdown in its impact has to be regarded in a differentiated way in relation to the people living in this area. That's my presentation. I thank you very much for the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Tobias Pahl. As you may have noticed, we're sitting here in the same studio and conducting that event for you. I found it very impressive what you have shown, because of course we in Mannheim, we have also seen, for example, the multilingual service numbers that you have offered during the Covet time. So the communication was really going on, and communication, that's the key word, because now we've heard all our experts and now we want to go into the discussion. There are some questions in the chat, and especially our YouTube community is quite active. As you know, we are also live on the YouTube stream, and I'm going to ask our experts now, so we have time until 6:30 about, and then afterwards all of our experts have time for lessons learned that they can offer to the community. So the first question that was coming in was a YouTube question from Catherine Klein, and she is asking to our first speakers, Jens Loff and Erasmus Duong-Grunnet. She is asking, you know that people are more supportive, but is this true for Asians, for Africans, or others living in these cities?
Hi, this is Erasmus from Gale. So I can see those two questions, and the first one was about age, gender, and different backgrounds. So yes, when we measure, we look and observe different age groups, gender, and we observe people sitting together or separate, stuff like that. We don't go into race and ethnicity. We haven't done that for the first study. So the snapshots that we've looked at, and you can go into see the methodology and the report link that was also posted in the chat. You can see especially how it was done. But we have done it by age and gender and different groups like that, but not ethnicity or race groups, no.
Okay. Thank you, Erasmus. So is there anything Jens wanted to add to that?
Yes, excellent. So I think that the overall experience shows us that we have during COVID, we have quite a cross, let me say, experience disregarding age, race, and other cultural specifics. As the situation is felt by everybody. There are different patterns of reaction to that, and we know from studies that the whole family area and culture of family has played a big role in the initial phase of COVID, and out of that say socialization, obviously there will be different reactions, but I think it's fair to say that there's overall a change of attitude and also a willingness to support crossing these traditional discussions of race and ethnicities and age groups. So that is also the working mind, and I'd like to maybe to add a term to that. I think this is very much about identity and having the feeling that you are in a city experiencing people and neighbors and different socialization in a different way because you are on the street, which is a thing which is turned out differently during COVID. There's no end to or way to tell where this goes, and we will always have differences. I don't think we should argue here that there are no differences at all, but I think it's fair to say that we're in the middle of an experience which you can kind of form and be part of, and by that also influence in a positive way, and that goes for all mentioned groups.
Let me just add a very
Also, there is something to add.
That.
Yeah.
There's a little one. So we did look, for example, study in Copenhagen. We did do these surveys in quite different locations around the city. So definitely areas in the city where we have very different groups of people living from different backgrounds, etc. So I think it gives a interesting, different shaded shot, not just from one part. And I think it's similar if you look at a city like Mannheim. There are many different differences between the quarters, like we heard before. And this is something that should be said.
Well, okay, thank you. You have got, you commented on that, and there is some note coming in that you've got a very beautiful diagram in your report. So thanks to that. The next question is going to Elke Pahl-Weber, but maybe it's more a comment, but it's also a question, because Waltraud Gehrig, she writes, I do not have the feeling that we acted as a real community with bringing everybody, all different ethnicities living here on board. I live in Neckarstadt West. Did you have any specific information on the development in this quarter?
Thank you for the question, and you're completely right. We had a really not so easy process to find our partners, the migrants in Mannheim. There was an open call for participation. Maybe not everybody read it. There were letters written by Mr. Kurz to several institutions. They should recommend people. And so is the way we gained the citizens to work with us. And you're quite right. In Neckarstadt West, it could be that we have not been represented, that our project did not inform somebody. Even so, we had an online presentation. Who wanted could know what we do, and we invited all our migrants who took part to bring their neighbors, their friends, and so on. But you address a real difficult point, how to come to people who normally do not take place in these processes, who do not find their role. How can we involve them? We did a lot for it, but maybe it was not enough.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. There is another question coming for you, but maybe we can ask we can ask our time manager Tobias Pahl. How is it going in the Neckarstadt? Do you wanna comment on this as well?
Well, of course, the quarters management is active in the Neckarstadt West for a long time now, almost 15 years. Just this month, we had a change, a personal change. We have a new quarters manager in Neckarstadt West. And yes, we are pretty good informed what is going on there. And yes, we try to get as many people involved as possible. And yes, we do fail in this. They are rather large groups, you know, who are typically not taking part in processes of communication, who are not invisible, but who are not taking part. And we do a lot of work, and we do a lot of thinking, we do a lot of research of how we can get these people involved, because they are part of our community.
Thank you very much for this honest insight, because I mean, he's the expert, and the Neckarstadt is a very interesting quarter, but of course there are also things you have to face. There's a next question that has come also via YouTube, commenting, thank you, Dr. Pahl-Weber. How could you imagine a co-creation process in the context of quarters facing gentrification, a process where citizen involvement is mostly quite low? Are there examples for it?
Thank you very much for this questions, and this question especially. Let me first say that the migrants who work with us very early and very often said, it is so great that you address us, asking us on a topic, not how we feel like being migrants. That was really great. And the second thing is, yes, we know it is really very hard to come up to groups that normally do not participate or are not bringing in their interests in the process. I have one example from Swansea Platz, where we tested our way to build a place, to shape it. And we worked with a lot of children from different nations who did together their homeworks after school. They met, and we met them. And they were so interested in how can we participate in making the place the way we can use it. And they were able, these children, about 12 years, to draw what is their interest, to go out and show on this place we need that, on this place we need that, and then to form it. That was really crazy. And what I think up to now is, if you offer a possibility, you or me as a planner or whoever does it, please come in and show what you want. There is a possibility to do that. They can, the people can. We don't have to tell them what they shall do. They know what they want. That was really interesting, but it's a small example, I know, but it might be a first step.
Okay, thank you very much for this. There are also some questions coming from other channels that we have written down now for you. As we have observed, there are changes, and there have been changes through COVID-19. And this question goes to Erasmus and Jens, because I've also seen that you have found out, for example, more children and older people they are using the public space. And here one person wants to know, during to your experiences, which can be the most important change in public space after Covet?
So I think from the most important change very much depends on what group we're talking about and what city and what area. I think the most important change maybe is more a understanding that we can do very different things with our public space. We can take ownership of them and we can use them and we can enable them in different ways. Maybe a realization to come out of COVID-19 is that we, for example, accept and see streets as public space, really enter into a dialogue and negotiation with our cities and other users to discuss how do we use streets and what can they enable for us. So understanding the opportunities and having an impact and an engagement with how we use public space can be quite interesting to see how we can evolve public life in cities. Maybe that is one of the most important and fundamental things to come out of this, that we really engage with public space in our cities and rethink it to shape the type of public life we want in cities in a post-COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jens,
Yeah,
want
I'd like
to add something?
Yes, I'd like that, and really underline that issue. I think that the shift is more a kind of shift on a mental level. I think you will see a lot of very good, very interesting solutions in public space. You know, improvements on mobility, on squares, and how you take care of each other. But the core of the crisis is that we have been facing a challenge in a kind of a unifying way, because nobody is exempt from that. This is a very simple statement, I know that, but let's take this as a presumption. So if that's the case, we have a chance to engage in ways which Pahl-Weber has discussed with us in a co-creative way, that you get into taking care of your own city parts, of your own square, of your own streets. So this is also in this terms, a very unique, unifying chance. And I'd like to, you know, instead of, we have to accept, obviously, all the differences there are amongst us in the cities, in the gentrification questions and all this stuff. But we have here for a very seldom situation that we actually have a very, very unifying challenge, which we can work on, and we are offered the possibility to engage. And if we do that, then I agree very much to Erasmus in saying this will lead to a mental shift. This could be a very sustainable way of thinking of my city and of my quarter of the city, because I am asked to deal with this together, obviously, with other people, how to organize our city parts better in a different way, more adapted to the needs of elderly children and all the different kind of needs we're having out there. So again, this is a chance of creating this identity shift and also to be proud of what you're creating in your own parts of the cities. And this is very much important to keep, and also despite all challenges, we have to keep this notion, I think, in the process, in the foreground, and invite people to join around that.
Okay, thank you, Jens and Erasmus, for the answers. In the chat, people are thanking you as well, to all our speakers, very much for the joint effort. Now we have a question. People are interested in the Neckarstadt that is also coming from beyond. It goes to Tobias Pahl. Where in Mannheim is, in your opinion, the change most needed in public space in the neighborhoods?
I don't want to point to one place. I think I'm not. It really depends on what we as a community, as an administration that has to work for the citizens, what we decide as being important. And so I think it has to be some process of communication where we ask ourselves, what do we want to reach, to accomplish with public spaces? Where do you see the most problems? I could say where most complaints are, where the traffic is the densest, where the most people are, where it is the hardest to cross the street. And this is just my opinion. I think it's very much very important to get into contact with the people and get a picture of what would be legitimate in these places.
Okay, so thanks for these insights. And now you're getting active. That's cool. So there's a question coming from Florangela. Who are you? I hope I do pronounce that right. If not, I'm sorry. But you also thank for the presentation, and you ask, in the co-creation process, what is the criteria you use to select or validate ideas from citizens to be integrated in public space project? And this question is for Elke Pahl-Weber.
Yes, thank you very much. This is really a part of the whole process of urban design thinking. The group that is working on a special topic, that creates the ideas, develops the criteria related to the needs they found. And there is a long discussion with creative methods like brainstorming, like designing, like role play, to find out what is the solution that fits best. That means the co-creation is not just create an innovative topic, but work in a mode that is creative itself. And by this way, we came up with these solutions we have now, and the groups rated it to be the best fitting ideas.
So this was something that is to the topic co-creation. There was another question coming to co-creation, and I think this fits quite well to Jens and Erasmus. Also coming from YouTube, Terrazza Corona wants to know, how will ongoing rules on social distancing impact co-creation projects in your view?
Well, I definitely believe that will be the case. Now, the co-creation projects, as explained very good by Elke, are in the way we are looking forward into the city kind of creation of solutions. It's part of a let me say a process which is built to invite out people and find the ideas, obviously, and find the energies and find the needs to get to solutions. And I like very much the notion of, you know, putting the topic, the challenge in the foreground, and working from there to find solutions and ideas. The process, although, is designed in a way that has to be designed in a way, to my mind, that you connect these ideas with a decision-making level in a city. Now, this sounds a little bit technocratic, obviously, but we also have to accept that all cities are running their plans, and they have had very good solutions for many things. And so it's like a car driving a comfortable speed limit, and suddenly has to turn a 90 degrees thing. So you're changing kind of the scope of planning, and you're changing the prioritization of resources. What do you want to put in the foreground in order to accommodate the needs of your people? So getting down to the co-creation level, I think that co-creation has been around for a couple of years. The whole design thinking is a fantastic method to design cities and to design public spaces. But now it gets to a point where we can actually unify our citizens around a method and around a challenge. The challenge is deal with the pandemic. Use your resources, your streets, your spaces, and find better solutions. We have good methods available. We offer them to you. I do not think that co-creation is the only method to find new solutions for public spaces, but it's a very good method because it kind of brings people in a good way together, and it sets free ideas which we might not find otherwise. So for that matter, I think the intensity cities can use the co-creation processes and design processes can be raised if you are willing to call them out. That is a city management responsibility to organize the process, so we get the ideas discussed, right? And this willingness, and also the political braveness, because you will find ideas which you don't like for whatever reasons, but it's obviously, so you need to have the courage and to be honest and to be authentic about wanting these ideas on the table, right? And I think that is the time now for cities to go more and stronger this way in connection with the public space discussion, at least.
Okay, right, thanks. Erasmus, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I could just briefly add, I think one of the tools we often use is doing pilot projects. So we work a lot with data collection and looking at how people are using public spaces. So when there are ideas on the table, things that might work, pilot project is a way of doing a temporary and quick implementation of idea, but not to leave it at that, but then go out and see how people are reacting and how they're using it, and looking at both the current situation where we have very changing rules on social distancing. You can't do finalized implementation projects always. You try out things that can help to relieve people in a situation. So for example, pop-up bicycle lanes is a type of pilot projects. The use of parking spaces for other activities can be a term for pilot projects. You need to then go out, also measure it and see how people are reacting to it and responding it if you want to make an argument for maintaining and doing long-term strategies about some of these things. So pilot projects are a way of testing out what works and also try different solutions with ongoing rules on social distancing, but also ongoing reactions to how we respond to the COVID-19 situation. So pilot project is one way of doing this in a good way, but it's important to remember to have tests of, or data collection, understanding of how people responding to these things. Are they using them? How are they using them? Are they using them in a different way? So you build up arguments for also maintaining these things and making them more long-term viable.
Okay, thank you for this additional view on co-creation. There is another question coming from Andreas Koch from Heidelberg-Walldorf, Urban Innovation Stadt Neudenken. He asks, do we need project scouts who live in Mannheim or nearby the people when we want to change something in the city? This is a quite open question, and I will pass it to the person right next to me, Tobias Pahl.
Actually, I'm not really sure if I do understand the question correctly. A project scout, someone is scouting something that is already there. The project, the writer means, I think, are not there already. So what we do need is some kind of translation, some bridge building, some mediation between resident groups and us as the administration, the political sphere, also the economic sphere, to foster, to boost understanding in every direction. That for sure. But I don't think that the project scout, in the sense of someone who's looking for existing projects and making them becoming real, is something we really need. But some translation function in any case, yes.
Simone, could I add to that?
I'm just looking into our chat, and there is no more things coming at the moment. And we can do some co-creation together, of course, because we still have 6 minutes, and here are our experts. So use the time And oh great, there is something coming from Harun Bakirci or Pakiri. Since public transportations are constantly busy in highly populated cities, do you think there could be a way to prevent the virus to spread in public transportations? This is an open question. I mean, I will now change our method. Anyone who is willing to answer this question, please unmute.
Okay, I can at least make a comment to the question. Whether or not I can answer it, I'm not sure. I'm not a trained virologist. I think, again, I think we can look at some of the things that are changing under a situation like COVID-19. So, for example, the use of public transportation often have had peak times that have been linked with morning rush hour, afternoon rush hour. And I think there's an opportunity now to observe whether or not some of these patterns can be changed. For example, if people are doing more dynamic relationship to workday, we can work virtually, we can work from home. Does that change our relationship to when and how often we need to go to the office? Can we use these new behaviors to change how the working day looks? Can that have an effect on public transportation? So it's not really an answer to the question because I cannot answer this question specifically, but I can point out that there's an opportunity to observe and look at human behavior that is definitely changing and will keep changing, and see if we can use this momentum to organize the way that we, for example, use and access public transportation. That might be part of this answer, but also be part of other answers. For example, why do we all have to rush to work at 7:30 in the morning? Are there other opportunities to spread this out? So looking at human behavior as a result of things that happen in COVID-19 can definitely give us input to new opportunities, and this might be part of the answer here, at least. So I offered an opinion. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Thank you for your constructive ideas, Erasmus, for that. There is another question.
May I add to this answer?
Yes, maybe you ask some last question for Elke as well, because then we will go to the final lessons learned round, because it's already 8:07, and we of course want to be in time. So we have got a question from Harun Bakirci, again asking no, sorry, it was from Teresa Corona. Thank you. Probably we will have to face a reality of increasing social conflicts in our quarters. So maybe we need to have more engagement in constructive conflict resolution.
An increase in social conflicts. What we will face is a deepening gap between groups with different chances to get good education. The long period of closed schools will have an immense effect of the social on the social structure and on the distribution of life chances. And we absolutely have to think of ways how to not solve this problem. We will not solve it. We will have this problem, but how we can deal with it, how we can soften this hard gap between the groups that have very, very different life chances. Yes.
Could I add to that, Simone?
Thank you very much, Tobias. And there are some comments coming in. Here it is being said. Okay.
Simone, could I add to that? I think that.
Oh, yes, sorry. Jens wants to say something. Sorry, I will get some additional advice from the technical team here. Sorry, Jens.
That's good. I cannot help you with that, but on this thing about conflicts and social conflicts, I totally agree that there's a big danger ahead of us, and this is actually no matter what society we're living in what part of the world we're living in, there are a big danger that the unfairness of how a crisis will strike us will be a point of discussion. And I think very much here that the starting statement of Peter Kurz as your Lord Mayor is enormously important, because there's actually no other structure in terms of society or government, no other structure than the city, than the local level of the cities, who can engage in a discussions about what effects will strike where, and can also engage in a constructive, and I would say, a solution to trouble which will arise. This will not take away all unfairness of a pandemic situation, but it will provide a platform for discussing some changes. And I don't see any other level than the local level being able to organize such a process and to kind of take the what do you call it, the hard corners, the arrows out of these discussions, and bring it up to a constructive level where we can obviously discuss challenges and problems we feel, but having identified them, take them to what kind of solutions can we provide, and what can the different communities do, what can the neighbors do, but also what can the city do and must do, and what can other levels of society do. And I think you have to keep such an optimism to deal with this looming situation of conflict and social conflict, which we will have to accept is around the corner to some end.
Thank you, Jens, for adding this. Elke, is there anything that you want to add this discussion? Maybe which way design thinking can be used to address these kind of pandemic conflicts? Maybe give us like a methodological view.
Yes, thank you. I'm quite sure that urban design thinking, which is a little bit different from the design thinking of products, can help during the pandemic phase to bring people together. There was a question in the chat, how could that take place in phases of social distancing? If we are in a phase like this, there is no urban lab coming together. We try it. We will have a lab in Mannheim on Friday and Saturday this week. We have these shields, and we'll meet in the outside area in a park. And we will see whether it works even in this really hard conditions. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know whether we will be successful, but if it is, we can learn that we have the possibility to apply a method to come into a discussion, into information about the different positions, not to learn what has to be done and what is not my opinion, but who has which opinion and how can we bring it together, even when there is a social conflict, because it's always coming out with a productive solution. There is no remaining on the conflict, but going forward. This is something I learned in the processes we had, not only in Mannheim, we had a huge project here in Berlin as well, that this is a moment where all detect, okay, I accept this opinion and I can work with it, and let us find a way to deal with that. And this is something we are with this in this COVID-19 pandemic. We are in a situation where we have a very fast transformation of the city. And if we do not talk about it, and if we do not help to bring it forward, we as citizens mainly, and public administration and entrepreneurs and scientists, we will miss a very big chance.
It was a very nice final sentence. Thanks, Elke. So you may have watched the time. We are going into the finishing sentences, and we've had a very interesting discussions with our experts. We have had our comments here in the chat functions. A lot of thank yous coming in from our listeners. Thank you very much for staying with us. And now our three experts. I will ask you now, one after another, starting with Jens and Rasmus, going then to Elke, and then going to Tobias. So what is your vision of public space and public life post-COVID-19? Please think about this and give us one or two sentences for that.
Well, nice challenge in the end, Simone. My vision for public space and public life would actually be a more viable and a more engaging situation you will see in streets and neighborhoods. We have seen already much more activities, which is proven by the data on the streets and the squares, and I really would like to see us keep this as a part of a future solutions, also in pandemic-free times, which I'm sure will come again. But this viability of neighborhoods is a big quality, and it makes things much more transparent and less mythical, even in challenged areas.
Okay, thank you. That is a nice vision. Now, Rasmus has already unmuted himself. I will pass over the word.
Just in a brief sentence, I think we've seen people take ownership of and experiment with and try out human behaviors, new behaviors in public spaces that maybe has not been seen in a long time. And I think that focus and that opportunity is what we should be focusing on here, that ownership, but then also the ability, especially within cities, to look at this, learn from it, engage with it, and plan with it, so it doesn't become a little phenomenon that happened in that little COVID-19 situation we had, and then it goes away again, but that we can actually build it in, we can work with this. People can take ownership, control, and involvement in public space and help shape the public life we want in our cities, the way we work, the way we commute, the way we vision our own future. And I think that is a focus we should really grab onto, work with, and integrate into long-term planning. It's going to be an exciting time. It's an interesting time for new human behavior in cities.
Well, actually, I wanted to skip to Elke now, but there was another comment coming in. So please let us stop that at this little end round, and we'll just have this question now. Here, someone wants to know if the innovation created in co-creation project is part of the process. What does this mean for the organizational structures of local administrations? The process, if I understood Professor Pahl-Weber right, is urban life in its all-day dynamics. But this is something yet quite far from urban planning decision finding structures as we have them today. So would we need more people permanently working from the cities that have to be paid by the administration and to be integrated in intersectional communication, to be up to date with dynamics of innovative ideas? So very long question. Maybe you can give a quick answer and then add your vision of the public space and public life post-COVID that we can pass on to Tobias afterwards.
Thank you so much. This is really a long question and it needs a long answer. To do it in a short way, yes, it's far away from the established urban planning processes we have. But I do not want to disturb our democratic system. The elected people decide. And this is something I want to hold. I've been working in Iran and in Egypt, and I know what it means if you don't have that. But what our politicians can learn is that there is a sphere where they are not realizing, but those who develop the projects are realizing. I'm part of the consulting board of the city of Ulm, Smart City Ulm. And the mayor said, okay, I need a budget to give it to those who develop the projects. So it's not a question that we want to disturb our democratic system, but the planning process must be open for modes like this. And my vision is quite practically, because I work a lot in residential areas. And what I now saw is that we have high density, built density and social inhabitants density in a lot of our European cities. And what we need is more open space shaped by the inhabitants themselves. So we need a new debate on urban density. Thank you.
Thank you for this, Elke. I've heard we need ownership. You said now we need more density of the people working. I'm pretty excited what Tobias is saying at last. I will pass over the microphone to him.
So, as someone may have noticed, the social inequalities is something I work with for a long time now. So I would wish for public spaces in our city to become more public in an unlimited sense. Ownership, yes, of course, but equal chances to take ownership. Thank you.
This is a very nice closing word. Equal chances for ownership. Now I try again to say we're almost over. There are no more questions popping in. Of course, you see our experts here, Erasmus, Duong-Grunnet, Jens Love, Elke Pahl-Weber, and Tobias Pahl. You can search them online as well and ask your questions afterwards. You know you're gonna get our documentation from this wonderful sessions. I thank you very much for staying with us this evening, dear experts, and for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you very much for our visitors here in the live stream, in our session here, also on YouTube. Thank you very much for the technical team that was doing really great and always fixing things. You have not seen what was happening, so this was really amazing. Thank you very much for the city of Mannheim for having such a great event as the Urban Thinkers Campus. And remember, this was just an appetizer for our real Urban Thinkers Campus that is taking part in autumn. So I hope I will see you there. I hope I will see all others somewhere, somewhen, and all the best, and never stop thinking. Goodbye. Good night.
Goodbye.